This story is titled, At the Anniversary Celebration I Sponsored, my fiancé introduced me as her foolish partner, who covers all her expenses and follows her around like a desperate pet, while believing she actually cares for him. Her friends mocked me saying I was at least good for something, and when I tried to leave, she confidently predicted I would return begging by the next day. Hey Reddit, TLDR, my girlfriend of 4 years publicly mocked me at her birthday party, calling me a puppy who pays for everything. Turns out she'd been systematically draining over $118K from me while cheating with multiple men. I'm 38 years old and my name is Marcus. I never thought I'd be posting something like this, but here we are. Fair warning. This is going to be a long story, but I think it's worth the read if you've ever been taken advantage of by someone who claimed to love you. I've spent the last week trying to process everything that happened, and writing it all out seems like the only way to make sense of it. Maybe sharing this will help someone else recognize the red flags I missed for so long. Until recently, I was with Victoria, a 29-year-old woman for almost 4 years. Or I should say I was with her. That relationship is definitely over now. Let me give you some background about myself first. I grew up middle class in Tennessee, where my dad worked as a mechanic and taught me the value of working with my hands. My mom worked in a hospital administration office and showed me what real dedication looks like. I learned early that nothing in life comes easy, and that lesson has served me well. After high school, I went to community college and then transferred to state school for landscape architecture. When I graduated, I moved to Atlanta with basically nothing, just an old Honda and $800 to my name. Now, more than a decade later, I run my own landscaping and hardscaping company. I started the business with just me and my buddy Blake doing small projects out of my truck. We'd take on whatever work we could find, slowly building our reputation one satisfied customer at a time. Now we've grown to 19 employees with contracts booked 6 months out. We specialize in high-end outdoor living spaces, patios, water features, outdoor kitchens, that kind of thing. There's nothing glamorous about what I do. I still show up to job sites with dirt under my nails and sweat through my shirts daily. I spend my days dealing with permit offices, supply chain headaches, and the endless challenges that come with running a construction business. But after busting my ass for 11 years, I finally reached a place where I could be proud of what I'd built. Last year, I bought a decent house, a 4-bedroom colonial on 1/3 of an acre that I've been slowly renovating myself. For the first time in my adult life, I have actual money in the bank and can take a day off without panicking about bills. It felt like I'd finally made it. Victoria works in medical device sales and has always been the type of woman who looks absolutely perfect. Designer everything, hair done weekly at some salon where they serve mimosas, nails always freshly manicured. She's the kind of person who spends $350 on face cream without blinking an eye. We met at an art gallery opening that my buddy dragged me to. I was there because I donated a custom garden makeover package for their charity auction. I remember wearing the only suit I owned at the time, charcoal gray and slightly too big in the shoulders. Victoria was wearing this stunning emerald dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, looking like she'd stepped straight out of a magazine. I was awkwardly hovering near the wine table, feeling completely out of place among all the art collectors and wealthy patrons when she approached me. She introduced herself and seemed genuinely impressed when I told her what I did for a living. Looking back now, I bet she was calculating my income potential in her head while I was stammering through our conversation like a nervous teenager. She gave me her number before walking away, and I almost convinced myself it was fake until she answered my text the next day. The first few months of our relationship were absolutely amazing. The sex was incredible, and she seemed genuinely interested in my work. She even came to visit me at a job site once, though she spent most of the time complaining about her expensive shoes getting dirty in the mud. Still, the fact that she showed up at all felt significant to me at the time. By the 6-month mark, Victoria had claimed a drawer at my place. By our first anniversary, she was staying over 5 nights a week, though she insisted on keeping her downtown apartment. I didn't question this arrangement. I figured she valued her independence, and I respected that. What I later discovered was that I was basically paying for that apartment through a series of loans that never got repaid. Looking back now, the red flags were fucking screaming at me, but I was too infatuated to notice. Victoria would lose her credit card at least once a month and need to borrow cash for emergencies. Her car always seemed to need some expensive repair, right when a new designer collection dropped at her favorite stores. She'd make these little comments about how I could clean up nice when I made an effort with my appearance, or how she was helping to elevate my lifestyle by introducing me to finer things. The most telling sign should have been how she'd suddenly develop convenient migraines whenever it was her turn to pay for dinner. But the sex was great, she was gorgeous, and honestly, I was just happy that someone like her wanted to be with someone like me. What a fucking idiot I was, right? It wasn't all bad, at least not at first. Victoria could be really thoughtful sometimes. She'd remember little things I mentioned liking and surprise me with them. She got me a really nice watch for my birthday that I treasured, though I later found out she'd used my own credit card to purchase it. She'd brag about me to her friends, calling me her sexy landscape man. And for a guy who grew up feeling pretty average, that kind of attention from a beautiful woman was intoxicating. Over time, though, things shifted in ways that were so gradual I barely noticed. The thoughtful moments became increasingly rare, while the financial emergencies became more frequent. The playful, teasing comments about my job evolved into something that felt more like barely disguised contempt. But like a frog sitting in slowly heating water, I didn't realize I was being cooked alive until it was almost too late. Victoria's 29th birthday happened 3 weeks ago, and I had spent an entire month planning what I thought would be the perfect celebration. I reserved the private dining room at Piedmont Kitchen, one of those fancy farm-to-table restaurants where appetizers cost $35 each. I could have easily arranged something at my buddy Tyler's restaurant, where I'd recently completed a beautiful patio renovation, and he would have hooked us up with great food and service. But Victoria always insisted that Tyler's place was too casual for important events like her birthday. I invited 18 of her friends and arranged for a custom cake with edible gold and something called mirror glaze that cost $200 or $8 alone. All told, I dropped around $200 on that single evening. I didn't even flinch when writing the check because I thought that's what you do when you love someone. You make their special day as perfect as possible. On the day of her birthday, I even left my job site early to ensure everything was set up exactly as I'd requested. The restaurant had prepared the private room beautifully, with flowers on every table. Her favorite white roses that cost $220 from the upscale florist she preferred. I'd put together a photo display showcasing our 4 years together, and I'd arranged gift bags for all the guests filled with expensive candles and bath products that Victoria had once mentioned admiring. I had even tracked down some limited edition dessert wines that she'd been talking about for months to serve, alongside the elaborate cake. The gift I'd gotten her was burning a hole in my pocket. A pair of emerald earrings that perfectly matched her eyes, wrapped in a box from the jewelry store she always lingered in front of whenever we walked through the mall. The dinner started off great. The food was good, though ridiculously overpriced. I paid $75 for a chicken dish that honestly wasn't even as good as what I could make at home. But the drinks were flowing, and everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. Victoria looked absolutely stunning in this red dress that probably cost more than my first car. She was drinking fancy sparkling water instead of cocktails because she didn't like how sugar and alcohol made her feel bloated. The important thing to note is that she wasn't drunk at all, which makes what happened next even worse. She was completely clear-headed and knew exactly what she was doing. Victoria was sitting at the head of the table like the queen she believed herself to be, with me positioned to her right. Her work friends were there, these women with identical highlighted hair and shrill laughs who seemed to exist solely to validate each other's lifestyle choices. Her CrossFit instructor Derek was also there, looking uncomfortable in actual dress clothes instead of his usual gym wear. I'd always suspected he had a thing for her, and his presence at her birthday dinner felt a bit odd, but I didn't want to seem jealous or controlling. Her sister Sophie was there, along with a few college friends and all the usual suspects from her social circle. The atmosphere was festive and celebratory, exactly what I'd hoped for when planning this evening. When the time came for toasts, her friend Jessica went first, telling some elaborate story about their recent trip to the Bahamas, a vacation that I had paid for but wasn't invited to join. I went next, keeping my words simple and heartfelt. I told her I loved her, that I was proud of her accomplishments over the past year, and that I was looking forward to our future together. Everyone raised their glasses appropriately and clapped, and I felt like everything was going perfectly. Then Victoria stood up holding her water glass, and I assumed she was going to thank everyone for coming and maybe say something sweet about our relationship. Instead, she scanned the room with this strange, almost predatory smirk that I'd never seen before. She placed her hand on my shoulder, her manicured nails digging in slightly, and said loud enough for the entire table to hear, "This is my boyfriend Marcus. He pays for everything, buys me whatever I want, and follows me around like a little puppy." She paused deliberately, making sure she had everyone's complete attention, scanning the faces around the table with satisfaction. Then she delivered the killing blow. And somehow, he still believes I'm actually in love with him. The table went completely silent for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. Then her friends, these plastic surgery nightmares she calls her girls, started laughing. Not everyone joined in. Her sister Sophie looked like she wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. And my buddy Kevin, who I'd invited, just stared down at his plate in obvious discomfort. But enough people were laughing that I felt like I couldn't breathe. I noticed the server who had been refreshing water glasses freeze, mid-pour, clearly unsure of what to do in this incredibly awkward situation. I saw him make eye contact with another server across the room, both of them wide-eyed at what they'd just witnessed. I must have had some expression on my face because Victoria rolled her eyes dramatically and said, "Jesus, it's just a joke. Lighten up." But there wasn't any humor in her voice, just pure contempt. Pure, undisguised contempt for the guy who had just dropped nearly $5,000 to celebrate her birthday in the exact way she'd requested. I quietly placed my napkin on the table and stood up, not saying a word. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair, feeling those expensive earrings burning like a hot coal in my pocket. The gift I'd been so excited to give her suddenly felt like evidence of my own stupidity. "Where do you think you're going?" she snapped, looking more annoyed than concerned, as if I was somehow ruining her special night by having the audacity to be hurt by her public humiliation. "I'm done," was all I managed to say. I wasn't going to make a scene in public. That's not who I am, and I wasn't about to give her or her friends any more entertainment at my expense. That's when she said it, loud enough that even the servers standing by the wall could hear her clearly. "Don't be so fucking sensitive. We both know you'll come crawling back by tomorrow. You always do." She said it with such certainty, such casual dismissiveness, like I was some trained dog who always returned home no matter how badly she treated me. The words hit me like a physical blow, but in that moment, something inside me either broke completely or finally healed. I honestly don't know which. I just looked at her for a long moment, taking in every detail of her face. The face I'd woken up next to for 4 years. The face I thought I'd be seeing for the rest of my life. And I realized I didn't recognize it anymore. Or maybe I was seeing it clearly for the very first time, without the rose-colored glasses that love and lust had placed over my eyes. I didn't slam any doors, didn't curse her out, didn't make the kind of dramatic scene that would have given her more ammunition to use against me later. I simply walked out of that restaurant with whatever dignity I had left. I handed the valet my ticket and waited silently for my truck, standing there in the cool evening air. The valet seemed to sense that something was seriously wrong and didn't try to make small talk like he usually would. I tipped him $20 and drove home in complete silence. No music, no phone calls, just the sound of my own thoughts finally breaking through years of accumulated bullshit. When I got back to my house, the house I'd spent every weekend for months fixing up, with the deck I'd built with my own 2 hands and the kitchen I'd renovated myself, I made a cup of coffee and sat out on my back patio, staring up at the stars. Suddenly, 4 years of memories looked completely different, like someone had changed the lighting in a familiar room and revealed things that had always been there but somehow remained hidden. All those times she'd playfully teased me about my rough, calloused hands in front of her sophisticated friends. How she'd specifically asked me not to mention what I did for work around certain people because they wouldn't understand what she saw in someone like me. The way she'd roll her eyes whenever I talked about a project I was particularly proud of, as if my passion for my work was somehow embarrassing to her. I remembered that time I'd overheard her on the phone with one of her friends, saying I was not exactly intellectually stimulating, but useful to have around. How she always seemed to need entirely new outfits for every social event, because people notice these things, Marcus, and it reflects on both of us. How her girls' trips always seemed to coincidentally happen right when I'd mentioned wanting to save money for something important for the business or the house. There were those mysterious weekend conferences that she never seemed to have any paperwork or materials from. How she always kept her phone face down around me and would take calls in the other room because work stuff is boring. The way a certain male coworker's name would pop up frequently in conversations and then mysteriously disappear whenever I asked follow-up questions about him. I wasn't completely blind to what was happening. Deep down, I knew she loved my credit card significantly more than she loved me. But I guess I thought that eventually, she'd see past the financial benefits to the actual person underneath. I thought if I just kept being generous and patient and understanding, she'd eventually appreciate the guy who worked 65-hour weeks to provide all the luxuries she demanded. What a fucking joke that turned out to be. My phone started blowing up within an hour of me getting home. The messages from Victoria ranged from pissed off, way to embarrass me on my birthday, to defensive, It was obviously a joke, everyone was laughing. To fake tears. Baby, please, I'm sorry, come back. I scrolled through the increasingly desperate texts feeling strangely detached from it all, like I was reading someone else's drama unfold on a screen. I silenced the notifications but didn't block her number. Something told me I should keep evidence of everything in case the situation escalated and got crazy. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying not just the birthday disaster, but hundreds of smaller moments that suddenly made perfect sense in this new context. Like finding receipts for expensive lunches for 2 people on days when she claimed she was eating alone. Or how she'd get visibly irritated if I surprised her at work with flowers or just to say hello. Or that time I found a men's watch in her car that she claimed belonged to some cousin who I'd never met, never heard of before that moment, and never heard mentioned again. Sunday morning, I woke up after maybe 3 hours of sleep, but feeling like someone had lifted a 200-pound weight off my chest. With complete clarity, I knew exactly what I needed to do. But before I started packing up Victoria's belongings, I decided to do something I probably should have done years ago: a thorough investigation of our finances. If she was going to humiliate me publicly and treat me like some pathetic fool, I wanted to know exactly what I'd been dealing with all this time. First, I pulled up all of our shared financial accounts and started downloading statements from the past 2 years. I'm not usually the vindictive type, but something about the cold calculation in her voice when she mocked me in front of everyone made me realize this wasn't just about money. This was about power. She'd been playing a game where I didn't even know the rules. I created a detailed spreadsheet, tracking every emergency loan, every suspicious purchase, every unexplained withdrawal from accounts she had access to. The pattern was so obvious once I laid it all out that it made me physically sick. Over $73,000 in just the last year alone, spent on designer clothes, spa treatments, suspicious work dinners, and weekend getaways that I was never invited to join. Almost every major purchase seemed to conveniently happen right after I'd mentioned a business expense or investment opportunity. Like she was systematically draining resources that should have been going toward my company's growth. Then, I checked the black card statements more carefully than I ever had before. There were repeated charges at upscale hotels downtown on nights when she claimed to be working late at the office. The same restaurant name kept appearing with charges for 2 people when she was supposedly having lunch with the girls. I found recurring charges to an apartment rental service that I'd never heard of, which didn't make sense since I was already paying her rent. Against my better judgment, I decided to visit her apartment using the spare key she'd given me. I told myself it was just to gather evidence and protect myself legally. But part of me needed to see the truth with my own eyes. The doorman greeted me by name as usual. "Ms. Victoria's not here, Mr. Marcus," he said helpfully. "She left early this morning with a gentleman. Said they were heading to brunch." "That's fine," I replied, feeling my jaw tighten involuntarily. "I'm just dropping something off for her." Inside her apartment, I found exactly what I'd feared but hoped I wouldn't discover. Men's clothes that definitely weren't mine hanging in the closet. Grooming products I didn't recognize sitting on the bathroom counter. Photos of her with some guy at what looked like a beautiful beach resort, dated during a week when she'd told me she had a critical training conference in Dallas. I took pictures of everything without touching anything, not out of respect for her privacy, because that ship had already sailed, but because I needed evidence that couldn't be disputed later. The final nail in the coffin was a journal I found in her nightstand drawer. Normally, I would never read someone's private thoughts. That's a line I'd never crossed in any relationship, but my name written clearly on the open page caught my eye, and what I read made my blood run cold. Marcus is finally talking about expanding the business. Time to push for that Aspen trip next month. He won't notice the money if I time it right. I photographed several pages where she had literally documented her manipulation strategies like some kind of predatory playbook. Act interested in the landscape project, yuck's new Gucci bag. Pretend to be impressed by client meeting, a weekend at the spa. She had been playing me like a game this entire time, calculating every move and reaction to maximize what she could extract from me. As I prepared to leave her apartment, I stopped by the front desk to ask what I thought was an innocent question. Quick question. I'm helping Victoria with something administrative. How often does she use the Airbnb listing for her apartment? The doorman looked uncomfortable and shifted nervously. "I'm not supposed to discuss residence activities, sir." I nodded understandingly, then added casually, "No problem at all." Her sister Sophie mentioned the listing to me, and I was going to help update some of the photos for her. His face immediately relaxed at this explanation. "Oh, if you're helping with that, then it's different. It's quite popular, actually, usually booked 3 or 4 nights a week. The cleaning service comes every morning around 10 o'clock to prepare it for new guests." I thanked him politely and left, with all the pieces finally falling into place. She had been renting out the apartment that I was paying for, pocketing all that rental income while staying at my house for free most of the week. It was the perfect scam. I was funding her lifestyle while she was literally profiting off my generosity. I spent the rest of Sunday methodically gathering all of Victoria's belongings from around my house. Clothes, makeup, jewelry, the expensive Peloton bike she'd used exactly twice, the 6 pairs of designer shoes cluttering my closet, and all the expensive face creams and hair products that had taken over my bathroom. I packed everything meticulously in clearly labeled boxes. Clothes, bathroom, jewelry, electronics, shoes. It took about 4 hours to find everything, and I was amazed by how much of her stuff had infiltrated every corner of my space while she still maintained her own apartment as a profitable side business. I placed her spare key on top of the jewelry box and loaded all the boxes into my truck, feeling a sense of finality with each one I carried out. As I was doing a final sweep of the house to make sure I hadn't missed anything, I found the birthday card I'd bought her still sitting on my dresser, never given. Inside was a handwritten note about how much I loved her and looked forward to our future together, along with a gift certificate for a romantic weekend trip to Savannah that I'd been planning as a surprise. I tore it all up and threw every piece in the trash, feeling nothing but pure relief. Monday morning, instead of going directly to her apartment as I'd originally planned, I went straight to my lawyer's office with all the evidence I'd collected. Robert had handled the legal side of my business for years and had become a trusted friend in the process. He reviewed the photos, financial documentation, and copies of her journal entries with the careful attention of someone who'd seen similar situations before. "This is quite a situation, Marcus," he said after going through everything. "What exactly do you want to accomplish here?" "I want to protect myself, my business, and my assets," I replied firmly. "And I want to make sure she can't spin this narrative to make me look like the bad guy when this is all over." Robert nodded approvingly. "Smart approach. First, we document everything formally and create a clean break that's legally sound. No gray areas she can exploit later." We spent 3 intensive hours drafting comprehensive legal documents, a formal termination of all financial support, certified letters to credit card companies removing her as an authorized user, official notices to any shared accounts or services, and we even prepared a cease and desist letter regarding any potential defamation attempts she might make. "What about the apartment situation?" I asked. "I've been paying her rent for almost 3 years now." Robert thought for a moment, tapping his pen against his desk. "The illegal subletting gives us significant leverage here. If her landlord found out about the unauthorized Airbnb operation, she'd face immediate eviction and potential legal action for violating the lease terms." "I don't want to sink to her level," I said, feeling conflicted about using this information. "Marcus, this isn't about revenge," Robert explained patiently. "This is about protecting yourself from further exploitation. She's already shown she's willing to use anything and everything against you. You need to be prepared." That afternoon, I called the property management company directly. "I've been making rental payments for Unit 1506 for a resident named Victoria Davis," I explained to the property manager. "I need to terminate this arrangement immediately." "I understand, sir. We'll need written notice from you, and we'll have to discuss this with the tenant as well. I also need to inform you of some potential lease violations that have come to light," I continued. "The unit has been listed on Airbnb for an extended period, which I believe violates the terms of her rental agreement." The silence on the other end was telling. "That is indeed a serious violation, sir. We'll need to investigate this immediately. I have documentation I can provide," I offered. Screenshots of the listing, booking confirmations that were sent to her email address, which was accidentally linked to my account, and bank statements showing rental income from the platform. By Tuesday morning, I had all my ducks in a row and felt prepared for whatever might come next. I drove to her apartment building with all the boxes and a detailed plan for how this conversation would go. The same doorman who'd been so helpful the day before nodded to me as I walked in with the first load. "Big delivery today, Mr. Marcus?" he asked, noting the multiple boxes I was wheeling in on a cart. "Last delivery, actually," I replied. And something in my tone must have conveyed the finality of the situation because he raised his eyebrows but didn't ask any follow-up questions. I used her spare key one final time and brought up all the boxes, arranging them meticulously in her living room so she couldn't miss them when she walked in. On top of the largest box, I placed a manila envelope containing copies of all the documentation I'd gathered. Financial statements highlighting every unauthorized purchase, photos of her apartment being used as an Airbnb, pictures of her with the other man at the resort, and several pages from her journal detailing her manipulation tactics. I also included the formal letter from my attorney, terminating any and all financial obligations. My note to her was simple and to the point. I'm not crawling back. Everything is documented. Your landlord knows about the Airbnb operation. The black card has been canceled. Any attempt to contact me or damage my reputation will result in all this evidence being shared with everyone who matters. Your choice. I left her spare key on top of the note and walked out of that apartment for the last time. I felt about 50 pounds lighter just riding down in that elevator. The doorman gave me a little salute as I left, and something in his eyes looked like genuine respect. By Tuesday night, all hell broke loose. Victoria must have returned home to find the boxes and all the documentation because she called me 29 times in the span of just 2 hours. I didn't answer a single call. Then the text messages started, ranging from pure rage, "You had no right to go through my things," to panic, "Please don't show anyone those pictures," to desperate bargaining. "I can explain everything, just give me a chance." I forwarded each message to my lawyer without responding to any of them. Robert advised maintaining complete silence and letting her panic, letting her wonder what I might do next. Psychological warfare at its finest, he said with approval. Wednesday morning, I went to work as usual, checking in with all the crews, ordering materials for upcoming projects, and reviewing blueprints with clients. I told my business partner Nathan what had happened over the past few days. He just nodded knowingly and said, "About fucking time, man. That woman was bleeding you dry. No judgment here, no pity party, just the truth." This is exactly why I enjoy working with guys who build things for a living. There's no bullshit, just straightforward honesty. By Wednesday afternoon, Victoria had gone completely nuclear on social media. She started posting vague messages about how some men can't handle strong women, and how throwing away 4 years over a joke shows who the real child is. Her friends were commenting with predictable responses like, "You deserve better, girl," and "Toxic men can't stand successful women." I just took screenshots of everything without responding or engaging in any way. Each post was essentially another piece of evidence I could use if the situation ever escalated to legal action. She posted a tearful selfie with the caption, "When you give everything to someone and they throw it all away over nothing." The comments section filled up with people asking what had happened, and her vague responses about men who can't handle being called out made it clear she was trying to control the narrative. I almost broke my silence and responded publicly with what had really happened. But something stopped me. Getting into a social media war wouldn't solve anything meaningful. The people who truly mattered already knew the truth, and the rest could believe whatever version of events they preferred. That night, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I decided to answer it. "Is this Marcus?" a man's voice asked. "Who's asking?" I replied cautiously. "My name's Brandon. I think we need to talk about Victoria." My stomach immediately tightened with tension. "I'm listening. I don't even know what to call it," he said, clearly struggling with how to explain the situation. "We've been seeing each other for about 8 months. She told me that you guys were basically broken up, just living together for financial reasons until the lease ended." I actually laughed out loud at the absurdity. "There is no lease, Brandon. I own my house. And we were very much together until her birthday party 3 days ago." The silence on the other end stretched for several long seconds. Then, "Fuck, she told me that necklace was from her parents." "What necklace?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. "The sapphire one. She said it was a family heirloom passed down from her grandmother. That was the necklace I'd given her for Christmas, which had cost me almost $3,200. "Look, Brandon," I continued, "I'm not calling to cause problems for you. I found your number in her phone while she was in the shower, and some things haven't been adding up. After what happened yesterday with her landlord calling about Airbnb violations, I needed to know if I've been played too." "Join the club," I said grimly. "How did you meet her?" "Medical device conference in Houston. I work for a competing company. She approached me at the hotel bar. It was the exact same approach she'd used with me at the art gallery opening. Classic predator behavior, identifying and targeting new prey. "What's your plan now?" I asked. He sighed heavily. "Walking away. I've got screenshots of her telling me you two were practically separated, so I figured you might want them for your records." I gave him my email address, and sure enough, within 10 minutes, I had a complete folder of conversations proving she'd been actively pursuing Brandon while living in my house and spending my money. In these messages, she portrayed me as emotionally abusive and claimed I controlled her finances, when in reality, I was funding her entire extravagant lifestyle. She'd been telling him I was the problem while simultaneously manipulating me into paying for everything. Thursday morning, Victoria showed up at my office looking surprisingly put together for someone whose world was falling apart. She had full makeup applied, her hair was professionally styled, and she was wearing an expensive dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. For Victoria, this level of presentation was her version of battle armor. She was clearly preparing for war. My receptionist called back to warn me about the unexpected visitor. "Want me to tell her you're in a meeting?" she offered diplomatically. "No," I said. "Send her back. But first, call Nathan and ask him to come to my office, and maybe have security on standby, just in case." Nathan arrived first, giving me a questioning look as he walked in. I quickly explained the situation and asked, "You want me to stay for this?" "Just for the first few minutes," I replied. "Witness protection." When Victoria walked into my office, her confident facade faltered slightly when she saw Nathan sitting there. She'd clearly expected to get me alone where she could work her manipulation magic without any witnesses. "We need to talk privately," she said, her voice artificially sweet, but her eyes cold as ice. "Nathan's my business partner," I replied calmly. "Anything you need to say can be said in front of him." She glared at Nathan but quickly recovered her composure, sliding gracefully into the chair across from my desk like she was settling in for a performance. "Marcus, baby, this has all been a terrible misunderstanding," she began, turning on the charm that had worked on me for so many years. "That joke at my birthday dinner, I was just nervous with everyone watching, and it came out completely wrong. You know I love you." I didn't respond, just looked at her with what I hoped was a neutral expression. Her discomfort with my silence was obvious, but she pressed on. "The Airbnb thing, I was just trying to contribute financially to our relationship. I should have told you about it, but I was saving up to surprise you with a vacation to celebrate your business success." Still complete silence from me. She was clearly getting rattled by my lack of reaction. "And those photos with Brandon that you somehow got. He's just a colleague from work. Nothing happened between us. You're the only one I want to be with." Finally, I spoke. "Are you finished?" She blinked, clearly thrown off balance by my calm demeanor. I just want us to work this out. I'll pay you back for everything, I promise." I pulled out a thick folder from my desk drawer and slid it across to her. "Inside this folder, you'll find every single message between you and Brandon from the past 8 months. He contacted me yesterday. Seems you told him we were practically separated and just living together for financial convenience." The color visibly drained from her face as she realized the extent of what I knew. "Also inside," I continued methodically, "is a printout documenting all the money you've taken from me over the last 2 years. The total comes to over $118,000. There's also a formal letter from my attorney indicating that any further contact from you will be considered harassment. And finally, there's a copy of the report your landlord filed with the rental board about your illegal subletting activities." Her carefully constructed mask of contrition suddenly slipped, and her face contorted with pure rage. "You son of a bitch! You think you can just throw me away like garbage? I made you. Before me, you were just some pathetic landscaper with dirt under his nails. I gave you class, I gave you status." Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his chair behind me, clearly taken aback by her sudden transformation. I remained perfectly calm throughout her outburst. "Is that all?" I asked evenly. This seemed to infuriate her even more. "This isn't over," she hissed, standing up abruptly. "I know things about your business. Permits that weren't filed properly, cash jobs you didn't report. I could ruin you with one phone call." And there it was, the final confirmation of exactly who she really was. Instead of getting angry, I actually smiled, which seemed to unnerve her more than any angry response would have. Every permit for every job we've ever done is properly filed with the appropriate authorities. Every single dollar that comes through this business is completely accounted for. My company was successful before you came into my life, and it will continue to be successful long after you're gone. But thank you for adding attempted blackmail to the growing list of reasons why this relationship is permanently over." I stood up from my desk, signaling that this conversation was finished. "Nathan will show you out. Any further communication needs to go through my attorney." As Nathan escorted her toward the door, she suddenly turned back toward me, and crocodile tears began streaming down her perfectly made-up face. "Please, Marcus, I'm sorry. I really do love you. I just got scared of how much I need you in my life." For just a brief moment, I felt a twinge of doubt creep in. The tears looked real, and her voice carried a vulnerability I hadn't heard in years. Then I remembered her voice at that birthday dinner, cold and certain. "You'll come crawling back by tomorrow. You always do. Goodbye, Victoria," I said, turning back to my computer. It's been educational. It's been 3 weeks since the birthday disaster, and things have settled into a new normal that feels surprisingly peaceful. My lawyer called to inform me that Victoria was officially evicted from her apartment for lease violations. The property management company is pursuing legal action against her for the unauthorized Airbnb income, which they calculated at approximately $44,000 over the past year alone. That money came directly from the rent payments I was making, so she was essentially double-dipping on my generosity. Last week, I received an unexpected call from Victoria's sister Sophie. We'd always gotten along well, and she was one of the few people at that birthday dinner who looked genuinely horrified by what Victoria had said to me. "You doing okay?" she asked when I picked up the phone. "Getting there," I replied. "What's up?" What Sophie told me next filled in some crucial missing pieces of the puzzle. It turns out that Victoria's medical device sales job wasn't going as well as she'd been claiming. She'd been on thin ice with her company for months, not for missing sales quotas as she'd told me, but for unprofessional behavior with clients and inappropriate relationships with colleagues. Plural, not just Brandon. The days she missed from work after our breakup, combined with a formal complaint that Brandon's company had filed about her conducting a personal relationship without proper disclosure, which violated industry ethics policies, resulted in her termination with no severance package. "She's been telling everyone that you got her fired," Sophie said, sounding exhausted by her sister's drama. "She's claiming you called her boss and made up lies about her. I know that's not true, but I thought you should know what she's saying about you." "Thanks for the heads up," I said, genuinely appreciating her honesty. "How are you holding up with all this chaos?" There was a long pause on the line before Sophie spoke again. "Can I tell you something in confidence?" "Of course." "I'm actually relieved that you left her," she said quietly. "She's been using you for years and we've all seen it happening. Mom and Dad have tried to talk to her about how she treats you, but she just throws tantrums whenever anyone questions her behavior. You're a genuinely good guy, Marcus. You deserved so much better than how she treated you." That conversation felt like validation from the most unexpected source. Someone from Victoria's own family confirming what I'd finally realized about the relationship. The cherry on top of this whole situation came yesterday. Remember that black credit card she'd been using for years? After I canceled it, she apparently tried to use it at Neiman Marcus for a $5,100 shopping spree. When the card was declined, she created such a dramatic scene that security had to be called. According to a friend of mine who works there, she was screaming about how the card couldn't possibly be canceled because her boyfriend is too pathetic to stand up to her. It's funny how quickly people's true nature becomes apparent when the money stops flowing. All those friends who were laughing at her joke at the birthday party and calling me toxic on social media, not a single one has offered her a place to stay or any real support. Turns out that people who bond primarily over materialism and superficial lifestyle choices aren't big on actual friendship when you can no longer pick up the tab. The real karma, though, came in the form of a business opportunity. Last week, I was meeting with potential clients at their beautiful home to discuss a major renovation project. Easily a $220,000 job involving a complete backyard transformation. As I was walking them through my design plans and showing them examples of previous work, the wife kept giving me these strange looks. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry, but you look so familiar. Have we met before?" "I don't think so," I replied, continuing with my presentation and trying not to let her questioning distract me from the business at hand. At the end of our meeting, as they were reviewing the contract and preparing to sign, she suddenly exclaimed, "Wait, you're Victoria's boyfriend. We were at her birthday party a few weeks ago." My stomach immediately dropped. It was one of the women who had been sitting at that table, one of the people who had laughed when Victoria made her cruel joke at my expense. I prepared myself for awkwardness, or even for them to back out of the contract entirely. Instead, she looked me straight in the eye and said something I never expected. "What she did to you was absolutely horrible. My husband and I were mortified by her behavior. We only laughed because we were so uncomfortable and didn't know what else to do in that moment. I've been wanting to apologize to you ever since that night." I was completely speechless. Her husband nodded in agreement and added, "We've known Victoria for years through mutual friends, but that night was the last straw for us too. No one should ever be treated that way, especially not in public." Not only did they sign the contract, but they referred me to 3 of their friends for similar large-scale projects. Sometimes karma works in the most unexpected ways, turning what should have been a humiliating experience into actual business growth. The final showdown happened this morning. I was at my newest job site, overseeing a complete home landscape renovation for a tech executive, when Victoria showed up looking rough around the edges. She had minimal makeup on, Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing simple jeans and a basic blouse. For someone like Victoria, this was practically homeless attire. A dramatic departure from her usual designer perfection. "Marcus, please," she said. And for the first time in our entire relationship, she was actually crying real tears, instead of the manufactured ones I'd grown accustomed to. "I've lost everything. My job, my apartment, most of my friends. I have nowhere to go. My parents won't even let me move back home. They said it's tough love or some shit like that." I continued inspecting the grading work my crew had completed, not even bothering to look at her directly. Her desperation was palpable, but I felt surprisingly unmoved by it. "Please, Marcus, I'll do anything," she continued, her voice breaking. "I've learned my lesson, I swear. I'll get a real job, I'll contribute to the relationship, I'll be better. Just please don't leave me like this." I finally looked at her, and for just a second I felt a twinge of sympathy. She looked genuinely broken, and there was a part of me that remembered loving this woman. Then I remembered her voice from that birthday dinner, so cold and certain of her power over me. "You'll come crawling back," I said quietly, echoing her own words. "Looks like you're the one crawling now. Not a great feeling, is it?" I turned to walk away, then paused and looked back at her one more time. "Oh, and Victoria, that diamond tennis bracelet you lost last year? The one you made me buy a replacement for? I found the original hidden in your makeup bag when I was packing up your things, along with the stolen earrings from Christmas before last and the missing Cartier watch." The look of shock and guilt that flashed across her face told me everything I needed to know. "I'm wondering now how many other things you conveniently lost so that I'd buy them twice," I continued. It wasn't just a few isolated incidents. This had been a deliberate pattern of theft and manipulation. "You know what the really sad part is?" I said, looking at her one final time. "If you'd actually loved me even half as much as you loved my money, I would have given you the world anyway. You didn't have to lie and manipulate and steal. But you couldn't see past the dollar signs to the actual person standing in front of you." As I walked away toward my truck, my site foreman Carlos approached me. "Boss, you want me to call security?" he asked, having witnessed the entire uncomfortable exchange. I shook my head. "No need, she's leaving." And she did, sobbing all the way back to her car, which I noticed was making that weird knocking sound again. Funny how her car always seemed to develop expensive problems right when she wanted something new and costly. Carlos just shook his head knowingly. "My ex was like that too, boss. Users can smell a good man from a mile away and they know exactly how to work us." "How do you get over it?" I asked him, genuinely curious about his perspective. He shrugged philosophically. "Time and eventually finding someone who actually gives a damn about who you are, not what you can give them." Last night, I had dinner with a woman named Elena, who owns a small bakery that supplies fresh bread to local restaurants. I met her when she was making a delivery to my buddy Tyler's place. She showed up wearing jeans and a simple sweater, asked genuine questions about my work, and actually listened to my answers with real interest. When the check came, she insisted on splitting it down the middle. After dinner, she invited me to see her bakery kitchen. Not as some pretense or manipulation, but because she genuinely wanted to show me the vintage mixer she'd restored herself and talk about her passion for her craft. Standing there at 11 o'clock at night, watching her get genuinely excited about sourdough starters and explaining the science behind different bread-making techniques, I realized something important. I'd much rather be with someone who gets excited about creating things than someone who only gets excited about buying things. I don't know if anything serious will develop with Elena, but for the first time in years, I'm not measuring my self-worth by what I can provide to someone else financially. My phone still lights up periodically with desperate texts from Victoria, now offering things she'd never considered doing before if I'll just take her back. Each message makes me more certain that I made the right decision. Some guys never escape the golden handcuffs of dating someone who sees them as nothing more than an ATM with a pulse. I got lucky. I got to see behind the curtain in the most public and humiliating way possible. And as painful as it was, that experience probably saved me years of my life. The most satisfying part of this entire experience has been my decision to start donating to a financial literacy program that helps people recognize and escape financially abusive relationships. When I told the program director my story, she nearly fell out of her chair. She asked if I'd consider speaking at their next workshop about red flags and manipulation tactics. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that level of public sharing yet, but maybe someday my experience can help someone else recognize the warning signs I missed for so long. Just last week, I ran into Derek, Victoria's former CrossFit instructor, at the hardware store. He approached me cautiously, like he was afraid I might punch him for being part of her social circle. I just want you to know, he said nervously. She tried the same shit with me after you left. Showed up at the gym crying about needing a place to stay, offering, well, you know what she was offering. I nodded, not particularly surprised by this revelation. I shut it down immediately, he continued. I've seen how she operates, and I wanted no part of it. I appreciated his honesty. Smart man. She wasn't just cheating with Brandon, Derek added, looking around to make sure no one else could hear. There were at least 2 other guys that I know of. She'd bring them to my 6 a.m. classes when she thought no one who knew you would be there. This information should have hurt, but instead, it felt like final confirmation that I'd made the right decision. The last pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, completing a picture I'd been too blind to see while I was living it. Thanks for telling me, I said, genuinely grateful for his honesty. For what it's worth, Derek said as we prepared to part ways, you seem happier now, less, I don't know, hunched over. Like you're not carrying a weight on your shoulders anymore. He was absolutely right. I stand taller these days and sleep better too. As for Victoria, I heard through Sophie that she finally moved back to her hometown in Florida and got a job at her uncle's insurance company. Apparently, she's been telling everyone there that she left Atlanta because her ex-boyfriend was abusive. The same old Victoria, rewriting history to make herself the victim in every situation. But here's the thing about small towns. Reputation follows you everywhere, and people talk. From what Sophie tells me, it didn't take long for people to see through Victoria's act. The constant need for validation, the materialistic demands, the subtle manipulation tactics. When you've been running the same playbook your entire life, it becomes pretty obvious to anyone who's paying attention. Elena and I have been taking things slow, which feels refreshing after years of Victoria's intensity and drama. Elena is nothing like Victoria in any way that matters. She builds things instead of just consuming them. She gets excited about creating value rather than extracting it from other people. The other night, she helped me install new irrigation lines for a backyard project I was working on. She got completely covered in mud and laughed the whole time, never once complaining about her manicure getting ruined or worrying about her appearance. I'll admit that I still have some trust issues. I still flinch slightly when Elena reaches for her wallet at dinner, and I find myself wondering if there's some angle I'm not seeing, some manipulation I'm missing. But I'm actively working on these feelings, building something healthy brick by brick, just like I approach my construction projects, with a solid foundation this time. So if you're reading this story and recognizing elements of your own relationship in what I've described, all I can say is that your self-respect isn't negotiable. Trust me when I tell you that walking away from the wrong person clears the path to finding the right one. The best revenge isn't making them suffer or trying to get back at them. It's living well enough that they finally realize exactly what they lost. And to anyone who might be in a situation similar to what I went through, the red flags are there, even if you don't want to see them. Financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and systematic exploitation don't get better with time. They only get worse. You deserve someone who loves you for who you are, not for what you can provide them. Don't settle for being someone's ATM just because they're attractive or because you're afraid of being alone. Your worth isn't measured by your bank account or your willingness to fund someone else's lifestyle. Real love doesn't come with a price tag attached. It's been 6 months since I posted this, and I wanted to thank everyone for the overwhelming support and shared experiences in the comments. Several people reached out with similar stories, and it's both heartbreaking and reassuring to know I wasn't alone in this experience. Elena and I are still together, and things continue to develop naturally. She met my parents last month, and my mom actually said, "I can tell she makes you happy in a way Victoria never did." Sometimes the people who love you can see things more clearly than you can yourself. Victoria apparently got engaged to some guy in Florida after knowing him for 3 months. According to Sophie, he's a successful real estate developer, so the pattern continues. I genuinely hope she's changed, but I'm not holding my breath. For anyone still on the fence about leaving a similar situation, you're stronger than you think, and you deserve better than you're settling for. The other side of that decision is so much brighter than you can imagine while you're still in it.